This is Comic Geek Speak, Book of the Month Club, Episode 1.
Worlds will live, worlds will die, and the DC Universe will never be the same. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak, Book of the Month Club, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Deemer.
Adam Murdoch here over the phone line.
I'm Jamie.
Shane Kelly.
I'm Peter Rios.
And welcome to our first ever Book of the Month Club. And as you've heard in our amazing intro, we're talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. Peter, why don't you start us off since, Crisis, you're all about Crisis.
Since you're the aficionado.
I think I'm going to be talking in my John Houseman voice throughout the entire episode.
That's fine. We can all do such a thing, no problem at all.
I don't know what it was in, but something was Alec Berg.
I love your big red comfy chair. Doesn't he have a big red comfy chair usually?
Alistair Cook.
It is red, though.
Yeah, it's not very comfortable.
So I guess the reason why we picked this is because
Peter made us.
Well, not only that, but for one, it's the 20th anniversary this year, and of course DC is coming up on their Infinite Crisis miniseries in October. So we tried to pick something that kind of tied into what's going on now, and also just because the scope of this book, it wasn't the first major event miniseries. I would Secret Wars is kind of like the first big event book, but it is the one that that everybody follows. This is like the benchmark, and it was so huge in its scope. I don't think anything has come close to it, and it's kind of tough. Once this came out, it was like every summer we had another crossover, another event, so it kind of got a little stale every now and then.
Well, I agree with you there, but this book and this entire series just had such an amazing effect on the universe, whereas things like Secret Wars, Atlantis Attacks, other summertime storylines, and I know I just picked two Marvel books,
Millennium.
but
Millennium.
Legends,
yeah.
They just didn't have the same impact that this book did.
Right. And what's funny is that as I read this, I was there in the 80s reading this book as it came out. That feeling every month or every week, because there were there were all the crossovers too. I have that same feeling now, personally. I have that feeling for what's going on now with Infinite Crisis and all the tie-ins to Countdown to DC, Countdown to Infinite Crisis. All that same feeling of, wow, this is huge. This is affecting everything. Changes are being made and they're going to stick. Kind of all that is kind of, I just have that same feeling. So we picked that. We picked this for that reason and for so much more.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure
and
can.
just say that Adam, who is joining us by phone, is doing his master's thesis on Crisis. So how cool is that?
What are you using as your theme, Adam?
My theme?
Yeah, like what are you trying to prove in the thesis?
I guess I'm kind of getting into the raison d'etre of Crisis. I'm trying to sort of explore why DC Comics decided they needed to have this Crisis. I mean, it was their 50th anniversary. They decided they needed to do some house cleaning with their characters and their histories, to make them more accessible to new readers and all that. And I've always just kind of wondered why they felt they needed to do a story-based explanation for this. If they'd wanted to, they could have just said, okay, this is what Superman is now, what he's been for 50 years. Next week, we're just going to wipe all that out and start fresh. But instead, they decided they needed to come up with this big, huge, sweeping story to explain, within the context of the DC universe, how and why these changes happened. And I'm just curious as to why they felt they needed to take that particular step, why they went about it in this way. Was it just for commercial reasons? Was it to give the fans some kind of closure? So I'm going to be sort of delving into that. Also, in the process, I'm going to be making parallels between Crisis and sort of myths of apocalypse and rebirth.
Cool. Very interesting.
It's way over my head, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, if I had to add my 2 cents to that, I would have to say it's because of the people sitting in this room that they did it. I mean, fans, you just couldn't just turn the switch and say this doesn't exist anymore. I mean, 50 years of continuity, you had to explain it in some way, whether or not you accepted it or not. You have to explain it to us. We're just that kind of beast.
We're needy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely are.
From the introduction, I have in front of me the Crisis on Infinite Earth softcover trade,
So do I.
and
Me too.
so does most
We
of
all
us,
do.
right?
Yeah, we all
and
have
so
a
does,
copy.
I'm sure, people listening. And again, just to throw it out there, if you don't know, we're spoiling this whole thing. So if you haven't read it and you want to, listen to this episode later. Marv Wolfman writes in his introduction that while he was writing Green Lantern, he received a letter from a fan wondering when DC was going to straighten out the DC universe, especially because they had Earth 1, Earth 2, all these different Earths. And that kind of stuck with Marv Wolfman. And he said as a kid or younger, he said that he created this character called the Librarian that he was going to bring into the new Teen Titans book. And he took that idea and he kind of, tossed it around, changed it. The Librarian became the Monitor, and he brought it to his editors, probably Dick Giordano at that time, and said, look, I got this thing, and we can totally use this character and create a whole event around this character and just, use it to explain our universe. And then that was about 1980-81, and they said, well, you know what? We got our 50th anniversary. Why don't we hit it, make it come out then? Of course, all the research involved, they just needed a lot of time. And from that came Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it was a way to clean house, as he puts it here. And it's funny, while I was reading it, I was kind of like, looking at the two Supermans standing next to each other and the two Wonder Womans, and I was like, you know what? I don't really miss that. I thought maybe I would go back and go, oh, I really do miss when they had all these different characters. But the universe now is so cohesive that to have that back again would probably create all the same mess that happened the first time around.
So let me interject here as the guy in the room who has read the fewest DC comics and only started reading DC in 99-2000 and knew nothing about the prior history. So I'm reading through Crisis, and my favorite book in DC is JSA. I love the whole team. I think they're fantastic. So I think I'm correct when I say that as I'm reading this, I discovered that the original JSA was never from Earth 1. They were from Earth 2, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't even part of the regular, normal Earth DC universe. So that just made me go, what the hell am I reading? How is the JSA? Because the JSA was out. That was the original superhero team, before the JLA, before all these other people. So how comes they were from Earth 2 and not from Earth 1? How did that happen?
That was like Gardner Fox or whoever wrote that one
it was just a choice. They were just trying to write stories, and when they would need to come up with a reason, they just they're on a different Earth.
They didn't want to destroy that universe or get rid of those characters,
Oh.
but yet they had a whole new generation of writers and characters coming in, so why not just make another Earth? That way
Right.
we don't get rid of anything.
So when Julius Schwartz, when he created, or when he pushed for the idea for the new Flash in 1954 or 56, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So he created the new Flash. He took all the old ideas, but basically updated or whatever. So he created the Flash. Then came a new Green Lantern and a new Hawkman and a new Atom. All these, they used all these names. Before that time, which is called the Silver Age, it was all the Golden Age characters. They were just on Earth. There was no designation, right?
Okay.
And then came. I should really pull out I have one of these official Crisis on Infinite Earths index that
I
has
love
a
those.
history of stuff. It was a story, The Flash of Two Worlds by Gardner Fox and Carmine Infantino from Flash 123, September 1961. They teamed up the Golden Age Flash with the Silver Age Flash, and that's all of a sudden that's where they came up with this thing where it says both Earths were created at the same time in two quite similar universes. They vibrate differently, which keeps them apart. And I guess because at that time DC's Silver Age characters were really the ones that were making all the money, or they were the only ones being spotlighted, that's why they decided to call that Earth 1 as opposed to Earth 2, even though those characters came before. The Justice Society came before the Justice League. So they had other team-ups, and then it was in Justice League of America issue 21 where the entire Justice League teamed up with the JSA, and that's where you got a story called Crisis on Earth 1. And then eventually it followed Crisis on Earth 2, Crisis on Earth 3, Crisis on Earth S, and that's why this story is called Crisis on Infinite Earths. They took their, So, yeah, they never existed on the Earth where the JLA was, and one of the things some people say about the outcome of Crisis on Infinite Earths is that it makes Superman less unique because he's no longer the first superhero in the DC universe. The Golden Age Superman is the first superhero, like on Earth 2 or in publication, and they say the Crisis kind of took that away from Superman a little bit, that he's no longer the inspiration for an entire flock of superheroes and whatnot. Yeah, so what happened was, and it kind of worked, since Earth 2 takes place, basically their heroes take place in World War II, it kind of makes sense to just kind of, once you put the Earths together, it still exists. All their times and all their stories, and even Infinity Inc., the sons and daughters, even that can still work. I know Roy Thomas was a little upset about Crisis on Infinite Earths and how it wiped out Earth 2, and suddenly he had to get rid of the Earth 2 Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Speedy, Aquaman, Batman, Robin, Huntress, and that's why you got Young All-Stars, because they were all basically new characters. But if you look, like Iron Monroe is the Superman character, Flying Fox is Batman, Fury is Wonder Woman, Neptune Perkins takes over where Aquaman is. So does that kind of answer your question?
I think
Yeah.
so. So I guess maybe for the benefit of the people listening who maybe chose to listen without having read Crisis, can we sum up Crisis in 3 or 4 sentences?
Ask Adam.
Yeah, Adam. How about you? Can you sum up Crisis for us in as few words as possible?
Well, I was thinking about one sentence that sums up Crisis for me, and I got to give credit. It's not my own words. I got this off of a website that I'm actually using as a resource for my thesis. It's called The Annotated Crisis. Something I'd encourage anybody who's curious about this series to check out, because it's very thorough as far as going through all the different issues and all the different crossovers and cataloging everything that happens. And the author of this website had this to say about Crisis, among other things. The modern-day DC universe is built on a foundation of corpses. Not exactly a cheery sentiment, but when you think about it, it is true. I mean, this is not a series where the good guys necessarily win. I mean, there's bright hope for the future, but there's also a strong element of tragedy. So if you have a weak stomach, if you don't like seeing massive amounts of characters die, you may want to steer clear of this one. But if you enjoy a thought-provoking read and don't mind seeing a little bit of blood and antimatter flowing around, give it a try.
Technically, I think it really only about 30 characters died. 30 heroes, I should say.
Millions of people.
Trillions and trillions of others.
But yeah, all those universes, and in issue 12, I think he says like 1,000 universes died before he was stopped by this one Earth, and then there were a lot of villains, a lot of lame villains that were dead, that were killed, that actually came back. Some of them actually came back, which is kind of funny.
So there were some things that, despite having read it all, I think I still don't understand, and I guess that's kind of normal, is when you're reading this, do you just kind of gloss over on the whole Monitor and Anti-Monitor thing, and when they're fighting, and when they go back to try to get the Anti-Monitor, and then he's back again, and then his energy lives on, and he's back again, and they think they kill him, and then he's gone, and then he's back, and it's like, Does that really even matter? Like, do we just read it to see what happens to the characters and not care about these new people who come in because it really doesn't make any sense at all? I mean, do you get that when you read this, or do you actually understand what the hell happened?
Yeah, I understand what happened.
What happened? Yeah.
Give a synopsis, Jamie, of like, if you can do it quick, you know.
A synopsis.
Well, just of like the major points, just for especially for people who haven't read it.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually hoping we'd go over each book, but a synopsis is basically it's two opposite beings evolved from a conflict. One was a good guy, the other was his nemesis or the anti-Monitor. They've basically been fighting. The Monitor was looking for a way to stop the anti-Monitor. Found all these Earths with all the different heroes. He throughout preludes leading up to it, he would show up in some books. He was supposedly getting together a team to stop the Monitor. During the course of the battle, he dies, but he imbibes his powers onto other heroes, and then they take up the mantle and they go against the Monitor, stopping him, eventually basically cramming, I believe, 4 or 5 Earths into one Earth, one cohesive Earth. In the process, like Adam said, piles of corpses. Heroes die, heroes sacrifice themselves, which I'll be honest with you, as I was reading this, I really felt more of a sacrifice. The heroes were sacrificing themselves more. And I'll go right back to my rant on frickin' Countdown, sons of bitches. For those of you who didn't hear my rant on Countdown, it was the totally pointless death of Beetle, as opposed to such powerful deaths as Kara, Supergirl, Barry Allen realizing that he had to basically kill himself to stop the Monitor's weapon of mass destruction.
Anti-Monitor.
The anti-Monitor's weapon of mass destruction, the sacrifice that the Golden Age Superman actually made, the choice he made to basically stay behind once the final fight. They defeat the Monitor. They slide Earth, the merged Earths, back into the positive universe. Because the Monitor had pulled Earth into his anti-universe, and there's only a little bit of room left. And all of a sudden, they see the Monitor is still alive, and they know Superman knows he realizes that he has no place in this new universe. His universe is dead. His wife, he had married Lois in his universe. He was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Star, and he realized that his life was, so he makes the ultimate sacrifice to stay behind, to stop the bad guy, to jump on that grenade to save the platoon, any other cliche you can throw out there, and just those sacrifices that were made, just to me even resonated even more. And this is the third time I've read this book. I've read it 3 times, and I get something out of it each time. Each time it's more and more. I won't say more and more powerful, but I find something new in it, something I was like, damn, I forgot that. I didn't remember that. And that's one of the things, as you read this, and we're getting emails saying, from Mr. Fusion, if you read the boards, he said he read 60 pages and his head was spinning. Yeah. I agree with you. The first time I read it, I didn't know a lot of the heroes, and I didn't understand it. And my head was spinning, too, after I got finished reading it. I understood point A to point B to point C, but I didn't see the background because I didn't know the history. But as you go and you get a little bit of the history of the DC Universe and you go back and read and look at the panels and study the panels, that's the glorious thing about this book.
The glorious thing about George Perez
is George
his
Perez's
storytelling is amazing.
Artwork, the number of heroes he puts in a panel, and even if you don't understand who those heroes are, look closely. There's something somewhere. There was and I know I'm rambling, but there was an entire, I believe it was issue 11, which basically takes place on the first day on the merged Earth, There's a panel with all these detectives, and it's like Harvey Bullock, Angel O'Brien,
The female Johnny Thunder.
Yeah, just a whole bunch, and I didn't know who they were until I read it this time, and all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, they have little name tags on them, so now I know who these people are. And wow, I just totally rambled off onto my synopsis, but it's very hard to put this book into any kind of short synopsis.
Yeah.
It's just that powerful.
Well, to go back to what Brian asked, I guess I'm the only one in the room that read it as it was coming out, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I read it when the hardback came out.
And I said this way back in like one of our first episodes that I got just enough DC knowledge before reading Crisis, like I started reading like in 1982 or whatever, that I totally knew who everybody was. And then they had the Who's Who companion series was coming out at the same time, if not even a little earlier, which was
Absolutely invaluable resource.
yes, exactly. And it helped because there were characters in there that then appeared in Crisis, and it was like, oh, cool, I know who that is. So as I was reading it, as each story came out, each issue came out, this goes back to what you asked, Brian. They had a plan. I was very surprised that the Monitor, the Positive Universe Monitor, died in issue 4, because I was like, what? Where's the story going to go without him? Then issue 5 comes out, and that's where Earth 1 and Earth 1 and 2 they're the first two to be merged, or going to be merged, and if they do merge, they'll explode and whatever. But they explain everything in that book, Harbinger, Pariah, Alexander Luthor from Earth 3. They explain what's going on to the combined heroes. So I was like, okay. And at the end of that issue, boom, we get the first appearance of the Anti-Monitor. Okay, here's the villain. 6 issues in, and we finally get the villain. Great. Issue 7 rolls around. He suffers his first defeat. He escapes. But not everything's. It's they've managed to combine all 5 Earths at that time, but still they're left with 5 Earths that are on the verge of being merged, I should say. So then he suffers another defeat with the Flash in issue 8. He was going to create a cannon that would destroy the 5 Earths. Okay, good. We're still alive. All right, and then came this whole little sidetracked moment with the whole villain war, and it was kind of neat because the backdrop of this huge story, we get what is traditionally just a comic book thing, a villain versus hero story.
Yeah, the villains thought they'd take advantage
Right.
and had take some Earths for themselves.
Well,
Right.
wasn't someone spurring them on?
Luthor and Brainiac.
Yeah, Luthor and Brainiac.
Yeah, and you know what? That's part that that confused me, because not understanding all the characters in the DC universe, the Anti-Monitor looks suspiciously like Brainiac, and I thought they were the same character.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you stopped seeing the Anti-Monitor. But
Right.
he looked like that. He was this robot thing. And then the next issue, there's this Brainiac guy who looks almost exactly like the Anti-Monitor, and he's talking in the same kind of word balloons and everything. And I thought, so the Anti-Monitor, the most all-powerful being, is teamed up with Lex Luthor?
No, yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and I didn't really, I mean, the way you're laughing now, I'll assume that they're not the same character. But
No,
when I was
right.
done
Sure,
reading,
I could see that.
thought, well, they're the same character. He just separated then from Brainiac or
Right.
something. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't,
No.
I thought Brainiac was like the husk of the Anti-Monitor.
Because see, and and again, it just goes back to if you're reading at that time, Action Comics, one of the anniversary issues, they totally updated Luthor and Brainiac. They gave Luthor the green and purple suit, and they made Brainiac a robot. And so they were around maybe about 2-3 years before and because Luthor even says, "Who are you? I've never teamed up with you before." And he goes, "I'm Brainiac," and it's like, "Oh, okay."
He said that in Crisis.
Yeah, that's actually
That's what I mean, and
Crisis.
that's why I thought Luthor didn't know who the Anti-Monitor was, because who knew
Oh.
him? And then it's like, well, and then he just called himself Brainiac because he just decided to take a new
Right,
identity or
right.
something. Because I thought Brainiac was a man.
He was that green-skinned man
With the little,
Same thing from the
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the diodes.
Same thing from the Challenge of the Super Friends and the Brainiac in there where he's
Yeah.
green.
So maybe that's why I was thinking, well, this is just the Anti-Monitor pretending
Right.
to be
Yeah.
Okay.
Brainiac, because I don't know who the hell Brainiac
Well,
is.
well, the whole thing. I mean, he went that way, and then when Byrne revamped him and did the whole reboot, he went back to being I guess, a man for a little bit, and then he became a robot, and that's talk about a convoluted history.
Yeah.
So while I was reading that, you get this whole supervillain superhero war, and you just knew that the Anti-Monitor was recuperating. So I was like, okay,
Laying in the weeds.
yeah, okay. So then they did all this, and then the Spectre comes about, and he's like, screaming because he realizes what the Anti-Monitor's final plan is. That's the thing. The Anti-Monitor just kept getting these plans, and they were stopping him. Supergirl stopped him. He stopped him from merging the Earths together. Then Flash stopped the cannon. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go back in time, and I'm just going to wipe out the positive universe completely, because that's the only place where you could change time is right before the Big Bang,
The dawn of time.
Yeah. So he goes back there. Finally, the Spectre realizes this. He gathers all the heroes and the villains and the mystics, and they all travel back. And you think they stop him, kind of, because the next issue, like you said, in issue 11, they come back and everything's kind of hunky dory. And all of a sudden, like, whoop! At the end of that issue, he's like, "Nope, gotcha," and he slides everything into the positive antimatter universe and tries one last time, and that's where you get the Monitor's plan, the positive Monitor. That's where you actually get what his plan was, where he was going to use the child from Earth 3 that had both positive and antimatter energies, positive and negative matter in his body.
And that's the Luther kid, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the red-haired Luther kid. Yep.
Right.
You got Pariah, who can feel evil anywhere and can track it.
Because he's the one who created all this mess in the first place, right?
He did and didn't.
It was. He thought he did, but it was one of those that was going to happen anyway, even if.
But that was his punishment for creating this mess.
Well, the whole lore in the DC universe is that if you try to go back in time and discover the creation of the universe, the Big Bang, it always turns out bad, and that's what Krona did. He was an Owen. He was one of the before they were called Owens, and he got sent off. And so Pariah tried to do that too because he was a great scientist. And when he tried to do that experiment, the Anti-Monitor, who was at that time locked away, like kind of in a stasis from fighting his counterpart, he used Pariah's experiment to expand the antimatter universe and to throw like some antimatter energy into it. So Pariah thought he was the reason why antimatter was unleashed, but it wasn't. It was actually the Anti-Monitor kind of found a way to and so then when every positive universe died, the antimatter universe expanded. So Pariah thought, oh my God, this is all because of me. And then you find out in issue 12, Anti-Monitor's like, no, I just used you. I just used the unfortunate incident that happened because of you, and it never really was your fault, And he even says, like, it wasn't my fault. Oh my God, So the plan in issue 12, Pariah's going to lead the heroes. Alexander Luthor is the bridge between the positive and negative universes, and he used Negative Woman so that she could use her from the Doom Patrol. She could use her abilities to tie up the Anti-Monitor. He created the Dr. Light so that she could absorb what he was using as his power.
Mm-hmm. The star. He was
the
using
star,
the star.
one of the binary stars. It was all these things finally came together, and it wasn't like this highly convoluted plan. It was just like, let's just throw these here together and see what we can come up with. And then, like Jamie said, it just took Superman of Earth 2 to unleash a can of whoop ass on him, and
a little help from Superboy.
Superboy of Earth Prime, and
then they just stayed behind and died.
Yeah, and it was no, they didn't die. They went away into the Alexander Luthor's body.
Did they ever revisit them ever again in DC?
Yeah, it was during the Kingdom crossover. Not Kingdom Come, but Kingdom. Sort of the sequel thing that came out, I guess, like 98 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the first issue of that, you do briefly see the Earth 2 Superman, and he's trapped in some kind of weird fantasy version of like 1940s Earth 2 as he remembers it. And he's kind of trying to get out, and he's like slamming into this invisible barrier that keeps him there. So he does still exist. He's just in some kind of like pocket dimension.
Well,
I had forgotten about that. I'm glad you said that because
yeah.
I was wondering that myself.
he was in hyper time. That's actually what it eventually because that's where they learned about hyper time, so that any story ever published by DC is actually out there somewhere. But as opposed to the multiple Earths that existed before Crisis, where you could travel from each Earth to each Earth, in Hypertime you can't. Although they have stories where they have crossovers, but it always is like if a Hypertime version of the Flash existed in our universe, it would really like start to mess things up. So you got to get the hell out of there fast. So because I think at the end of that Kingdom event, he really, they even mentioned something like, he's here but not really here, but we'll always remember him, and it's kind of slides into the whole hypertime thing, which is a whole other topic.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Yeah, big old can of worms there.
So I have another question. I seem to be the one with the most questions. All right. I just got done reading Crisis like a month or two ago or something. So last year, one of the series that I read was Superman Batman with Jeff Loeb. And they introduce Kara Supergirl. So I'm reading Crisis and I'm going, well, what the shit is this? There already is a Kara Supergirl, but she looks different and she's a little older and everyone knows her, and so what? And then she dies, but it's like, what, did somebody, everybody forgot that there was a, and why did they like introduce her like in a similar way? Like, I don't, what's going on with the whole Supergirl thing? Because I don't understand.
Well, before we go to Jamie will tackle that. Let me say that Marv Wolfman's initial plan after Crisis was to do kind of what they did for Zero Hour. He wanted all the books to start at number 1, and he wanted all the histories. If they were going to change, like if they were going to really do some radical things, he wanted them all. His idea was, let's start it all at 1. Well, they didn't want to do that because obviously they didn't want to lose the numbering, on a lot of books.
Right.
So that's why you get that weird year where you still kind of had the pre-Crisis Superman before the Byrne revamp. Wonder Woman finished, and then you get the Perez Wonder Woman. So everybody was kind of like, well, how does all this fit in? And in the end of the trade, they mentioned that anybody that went back in time, it was mostly all heroes. It was all heroes. Anybody who went back in time to fight the Anti-Monitor, they remembered all the Earths. Well, that kind of slid by the wayside, and what happened was you still get a crisis, quote-unquote crisis. If you look at your history of the DC Universe 2-issue series, there's there's like a 2-page spread of a crisis, and basically it probably was just the Anti-Monitor coming to destroy the Earth or whatever. It wasn't like this multiverse event. I wish they would do that event, do like an updated version, but whatever. So that's why nobody remembers, because they kind of just said, you know what, no, we can't have everybody remembering this crisis, because they'll remember the pre-Crisis Supergirl. They'll remember that there was 2 Wonder Women or whatever. So anything that anybody that got revamped, Wonder Woman, George Perez, Wonder Woman, Superman, yeah, they would know that there was a crisis and that Barry Allen died in the crisis, but they no longer remember, because it actually really didn't happen, that Supergirl died in it, because she never existed in the first place. Understand? Kind of.
It just kind of totally erased her entire history to them.
Right.
Okay.
But anybody that traveled back in time would know.
Which Earth was she part of?
Earth 1.
So the Earth 1 and Earth 2 merged, and
Right.
parts of each of the Earth and parts of the histories of each of those Earths
merged
lived.
together.
Right.
But parts disappeared. So
Right.
she was in a part of Earth 1 history that just was forgotten.
Right.
Is
Well,
that the deal?
because I'm sure Jamie was gonna say this, because the whole Superman thing got revamped. The idea is that, see, that's the problem most people have. They think that the DC universe goes from 1938 to 1985, and then everything stops. They had the crisis, and now we have the new. Well, that's not what DC's saying. What they're saying is, no, all that stuff between 38 and 85, all the multiple Earths, consider that none of that happened, and it all is basically one Earth now. So all those JSA stories are in World War II.
Right.
So that you have to kind of fit Byrne's Superman into that, so that there never was a super dog, and there never was, well, not until later stories. There never was a Supergirl. There never was a Superboy. So with this whole new amalgamated Earth, from 1938, if you want to go back that far, the idea is that all this stuff happened, that there still was a crisis in 1985. However, it didn't involve multiple Earths. It just involved the big anti-monitor and a lot of deaths. Who knows what his plan was, because they've never gone back and tried to tell that story, in the new DC universe. And that's why...
Every time modern-day DC characters remember the crisis, they're always just like, I don't remember much about it. Red skies, natural disasters, people died.
Exactly.
But somehow we're okay in here.
Right. Well, they do know that Flash died. I mean, they know that anybody that didn't have like a counterpart or was part of the pre-crisis Earth, they know, So then we get the myths of Supergirl, if you want to tackle that.
Well, no, I mean, that's, you tackled exactly, you said exactly what I was going to say. When Byrne revamped Superman and his history, they made it that he is the quote-unquote only Kryptonian. He was quote-unquote the only Kryptonian left, because for a planet that was so far away, there were so many Kryptonians flying around Earth, it kind of diluted the fact that he was the last Kryptonian. Well, through machinations and writings and other art, people coming in, they've since they brought Crypto from the Phantom Zone into modern continuity, and now they're bringing Kara, Supergirl, into modern continuity, and that's basically just and what Peter said. The only people that really remembered were the people that went back with the Spectre to the beginning of time, and in 11, those were the only people that were remembering what had happened, because everybody else was just kind of going along with the flow, and they were the only ones who remembered what had happened. Just trying to think there was something. One of the things with Barry Allen, you got the Monitor pretty much tells everybody that goes to fight in issue 12 that I killed Barry Allen, and that's when Wally goes, "You killed Barry Allen?" And that's Wally kind of goes off, and that's when, at the end of the whole series, that sets Wally up as a new Flash, which unfortunately Dan Didio kind of alluded to the fact that something's going to happen to Flash at the end of, because he said Crisis and Flash go together like peanut butter and jelly. So
I hope he was just kidding.
Yeah, I really do too. I mean, he if they need a Crisis to, they've told all their Wally West stories, and now they want Bart Allen stories, or if God forbid they're bringing back Barry Allen.
Yeah.
That is the one death I don't ever want to see reversed.
Right.
I mean, I realize death in comics is not, it's not permanent, but again, it was just such a good, heroic sacrifice that I don't want to see them cheapen it by bringing him back.
Plus, it gave us Wally West as a Flash, which is such a great character and such a great book, off and on.
Yeah.
So I hope they don't do that either.
Somebody in the audience had asked Dan Didio who the next writer was on Flash once. Who's coming up after?
Darwin Cook.
Darwin Cook finishes his little 6-issue stint. And he said, why would I need another writer? And everyone's like, and he goes, well, we made all the Green Lantern fans happy by bringing Hal back. Now we're going to piss all the Flash fans off by doing what we're going to do to Wally. And that's kind of how he left it. I'm like, God.
Yeah, who knows? Well, hey, we got an audio geek of the day from crap. Now I have to go look at his name because I forgot. Paul French. He's on the bulletin board on our forum as Toon Geek.
Oh, okay.
So he sent us an audio geek of the day about Crisis. So I'm going to cue that up.
Hey guys, it's Paul from Toronto checking in. Just thought I'd send my geek of the day for the special Crisis episode. Actually, I just got back from doing some grocery shopping while I was listening to episode 32, and you guys were getting into the whole thing about the titles that you really enjoyed, and it got me to thinking of a lot of the titles that I enjoyed. I had actually got out of reading comics at the time the Crisis happened. I was about 15, 16 when Crisis started. And I think I had pretty much stopped reading at around 1983, somewhere around there when I was about 13. Big titles I used to read before that were Legion of Superheroes, Superboy, Superman, New Teen Titans, and Justice League. When I got back into it, was actually 5 years after Crisis. So for me, it was kind of, what happened to Superman? Why is Wally West Flash? And it was kind of confusing. And someone quickly recommended to me that I get Crisis. So I got into that pretty quickly. And what I liked was that it served as my reintroduction into the DC universe and sort of my introduction into the new DC universe. And there was so much great stuff that happened in there, aside from the fact that the story was really cool and the artwork was incredible. I mean, I still think Perez holds the... Perez? I think I owe a quarter, guys.
Yeah, you do.
Aren't worth quite as much. So, anyway... the real cool thing about it was that there were so many characters and the artwork was just phenomenal. Even though really each issue of Crisis was more of a summary with kind of a main story and little shout outs to what was going on in other titles across the DC universe, it still kind of brought it all together. And then I sort of started my way into getting a lot of the Crisis related issues and understanding that. But the things that really stood out are the obvious events. I mean, first of all, you've got the whole idea of Krona, I believe it was, and the whole thing about that circle of time. And this has been addressed a lot in Green Lantern, obviously. And I can remember reading in the old Showcase Digest that they used to do, where they had a Green Lantern issue. And they went into that whole story and explained, what it was that Krona did and how this affected the universe. And it was neat the way they pulled, an event from DC history and made that pivotal to the thing that really ended the DC universe as it was known at the time and began it all anew. And then there's the obvious events. The death of Supergirl. I mean, that was from a powerful cover to a really, really powerful story inside. The whole interplay between the Superman of Earth 1 and the Superman of Earth 2, and you really got a feel for the respect that they had for one another, and so there was some great stuff going on there. And the death of the Flash. Flash was another title, actually, and I don't think I mentioned that before, but that was another title that I used to read back in the Carrie Bates, Carmen Infantino run. So it would have been around just a little bit after Iris Allen died, quote unquote, died, and then the trial of Barry Allen for killing Professor Zoom. And so I was a big Flash fan, and as I say, when I got back and it's like, Wally West is a Flash, how did this happen? It was a really cool story and a noble death for a great character. And I think the thing I like the most is the fact that we haven't seen Barry Allen come back, at least not for real. But it could still happen. After all, Hal Jordan made it back. So I mean, it was kind of the first way that we saw a lot of these changes. And I mean, a lot of people have really sort of neglected the way that Crisis basically redefined the DC universe and made it into something new. It gave them sort of a starting point. Everything we've seen since, you look at 0 Hour was really a big rehash on Crisis to a great degree. And out of that, we saw Kyle Rayner become Green Lantern. We saw the replacement of Superman with 4 different characters. We saw Batman replaced briefly by Azrael. And I mean, this was all stemming from Crisis, because Crisis let them know that, hey, you know what? You can make massive changes, and people are still going to be interested. And so, I mean, this whole idea of reinventing themselves is really the theme of Crisis. And so it was a real period of renewal. And for me, it sort of marked my renewal into the world of comics. And for that, I got to say, love the Crisis. Anyway, guys, love the show. Keep up the great work. I'm going to sign off now because I think I've rambled quite enough. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good.
I agree with most everything you said with that.
Yeah.
So as far as a period of renewal and just basically DC reinventing themselves, I think they set out to do it, and I think they did it well. I really do.
I guess when people argue about it being done just purely for business sense, I think it was more for their anniversary with the fans more forefront than any kind of money-making scheme, because if nobody liked it, they certainly would not ever have made any kind of money on it. It would have flopped terribly.
I have one of the crossovers here, and I loved it's Green Lantern 194. They had the banners over the top, but one of the best things about it is they put a giant 50, and they made the DC be the 0, and I thought that was just so cool, because it was like, you know what, not only are they just creating this huge event, the fans are all behind it, but they're also, you know, they're paying attention to their own history. When they put that 50 up there, I thought that was so neat, so awesome.
I have a question about Pariah in one of the issues. I guess it's 4 or 5. He saves Lady Quark. How come he can save her?
And why didn't he do that to anybody?
And he can't save anybody else.
I guess maybe never.
Did they? I actually didn't get through it this time. My kids kind of hindered me, and I kept dozing off with them when they would go down for naps. So I never got to finish it this time. But I couldn't remember the last time I read it that they ever explained that.
No, they never. And it was a question that I always was kind of like, well, why didn't he save everybody else?
Any thoughts on that, Adam?
Not immediately. I think Wolfman just kind of sidestepped it. But I do have the novelization, which I'm very, very slowly making my way through. And apparently in that, Wolfman does kind of go back and explain a few of the things that he glossed over in the original series. So maybe that'll be one of them.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I started it. I'm a few pages in through that novel, but not much. I put it all aside to try and catch up on some comics and try to read this.
Do you want a brief thing of why there's an old Supergirl and a new Supergirl? You asked that. I didn't know if we answered your question on that.
I think I might be eternally confused.
No, not really. That's just they came up with the Supergirl. Way back in whenever that was in the 50s or whatever, and it was at that time where, like Jamie said, all of a sudden it was like they found all these Kryptonians flying around, and not only Supergirl, but all the animals, and
let alone the Bottle City of Kandor.
The Kandor, the villains. He even could go. I think even his parents were alive. Through time, he could go and visit. So it made him less unique. And one of the things they wanted to do was make him more unique.
So then why are they bringing back more of them now?
I think they're bringing him back because they realized there were some elements of certain books that actually maybe they should not have gotten rid of. I know John Byrne, he says he wish he would have kept the whole Superboy thing. Maybe they felt that because they had all these other Supergirls around, maybe, you know what, if we're going to do this, maybe we should just bring Supergirl back the way she was meant to be, meaning his cousin. And her story's not finished yet. Maybe down the road we may find out something about her that I don't know. Maybe
I guess that's what's weird is why would they bring in a person with the same name and the same being his cousin and the whole bit if they got rid of it? So now it's well, which one is Supergirl? It's because they're the same but they're different. That's really confusing.
Yeah, it's just consider her the modern version of the Silver Age version. You know what I mean? What they did for the Golden Age Flash and the Silver Age Flash, that's kind of what they're doing with her.
Yeah, but they're different people. The Flashes were different people.
They're different people, right. Well, I mean, you could also say that about Superman. Once there is an issue, I forget what issue it is, that technically is the first appearance of the Earth 1 Superman. It's not really a introductory issue. It's just that all the elements of what we know as Superman, with Daily Planet and Perry White and things like that. They just, look at who they bring back. They brought back a lot of villains that that died.
You have to think that right now, the current writers that are doing this were all fanboys back in '85 reading this stuff, so they're drawing on their own love and experience for these characters. So if they can make it work and make sense and make it believable and likable to fans, they're going to do it because that's what they enjoyed as kids growing up reading it.
And nobody's in the books. None of the characters are going, hey, I seem to remember a Supergirl from, you know what I mean? This is the first time in their minds that they're seeing a Supergirl that is related to Superman, other than the Supergirl that was around during the Peter David run, the one that John Byrne created, and the So I think that's the thing. Nobody ever. I guess those Supergirls weren't big fan attractions, so they said, you know what, we want a Supergirl character, and who knows? It could be a simple thing of, if our Superman movie does well, we want to make a Supergirl movie, so we better have a good Supergirl character in our books. You know what I mean? It could be as simple as that. So
Superman's cousin from Krypton is a much easier origin to explain than what was going on with the other Supergirl.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
We could be here all night if we try to unravel that one.
Power Girl. That's 2 words. Power Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even that's being re-explored.
Yeah.
It's all so much.
It is.
I can't take it.
Well, and that's just it. I read Crisis when it came out in the hardback a few years ago. I got into comics right after Legends had happened, when Millennium really was starting. And for me, the first thing I was like, wow, I never knew comics did this, where they crossed over like this. And I read all of Millennium, and I got to the end, I went, oh, God help me. But then after being into comics for a few years more and meeting all of you, listening to everyone talk about Crisis, I was excited. I had started getting the issues, but then the hardback came, I read that, and while I was totally confused, I still enjoyed it. Like Jamie, I got from point A to B to C okay, but all the subterfuge, all the plots, all the people behind, I had no clue. So even like the half of the book that I got read, I understand so much more of the characters just from us talking about them from all these years now. I mean, it's been 8 years that I've known you guys now, and we've talked about this stuff, so I have such a deeper appreciation for what I'm reading now than I ever did before, and it's so much fun. I can go back and look, oh yeah, I know where I've seen that before now, just because I've gotten into it a little bit more.
This is just such a book, and I'll say it again, I said it before, it's such a book that on your third read through, if you enjoyed it the first time, I will tell you, put it away for about a year, and then go back and just reread it. And you will just see so many. I mean, this reading again. I was telling you about the detectives and all that. I finally saw the Sugar and Spike panel. I hadn't seen that before, and I knew there was one. I knew they had said they had, done the thing for Sheldon Mayer and his two little kids, Sugar and Spike. For those of you who don't know the history, and right there it was. I saw it. The little kids watching TV, and just I was like, oh my God, there it is. And then, I went on, but you will find something new with every reading, and that's a good book. That's a good story.
And there's something, you can read it on so many levels. You can just read it once and get all the history from A to B to C and be completely content with that. But if you're reading all the current stuff now and you want to see some more of all the underlying characters and all the characters that they're bringing back, you can read it again and pick out just anything. You can appreciate it for the artwork, for the writing, for the characters that are behind the scenes. You can appreciate it for the story going through ABC. There's so many levels you can read. You could end up reading it half a dozen times easily over time just to get everything.
And one of the nice things about it, I thought, reading it this time, kind of looking at, because somebody had said, I guess maybe it was Tico Man had said about reading it, and there were so many offshoots that you didn't get the whole story, and I really didn't feel that way. There were some that I'd like to now. I'm gonna maybe make a list, go back and make a list, and maybe when I go out to San Diego, try to find some of these issues that I'd like to see. Okay, what exactly happened in that Guy Gardner when he left OA, when they made him basically their Avenger, and he was going to go off and kick some ass doing something. I'd like to see that. I know I have a couple of the issues. I have the DC Presents with Superboy in it, and a couple that now I'm going to go and I'm going to seek them out in my books and try to find it. But I never thought, whereas in other crossovers throughout the years, you had to read some of the other ones to get everything.
Yeah.
This one was just on such a level, and Secret Wars is like that too. You really didn't need to read anything else to totally understand what exactly was going on. This was a book that was on that same level.
I did that, I guess 2 years I finished it up out in Wizard World, Philly. I got all the bannered Crisis crossover issues, and I used that index, I think it's the one you have there, as a resource that gives you all the layout of each and every issue, and I actually accumulated every issue, and even I think some of the DC Presents don't have the banner on them, that there are a couple that tied into that. And one of the things when I read through this, maybe the third time, I want to intertwine all those crossovers and read the complete story. Mm-hmm. And it's massive, and some of those issues are hard to find. I know I had a hard time finding the Loser special, and the Amethyst issues were the hardest ones I could find, and I finally completed them a couple years ago and just am biding time to set up to read all of it. I want to see all of it.
When the next version of this comes out, the absolute hardcover, it's actually going to be 2 books, I think in a slipcase. The second book has like supplemental material. They're including both of those indexes.
I read that. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. I mean, I have them, but that's really neat that they're bringing that
Right.
back for everybody because they themselves are hard to find.
Yeah. So they'll have in that book you'll get like you'll get every issue that crossed over. And like, we said before, some of them are just like, a page or two in the actual comic. Other books that tied into it later, I know like The Last Days of the JSA, that special explains what happened to them. You said the Loser special, and that's, I guess, why some people get confused, because the losers die in this story.
Yeah.
So what the special does is tell you how they really died in continuity. You know what I mean? Like, yes, they died in the crisis, but because the Earth then merged into one, they no longer die in the crisis because it becomes less about a time traveling kind of story. So what it does is that explains, okay, now here in the updated universe, this is how they really died. They never, reached you. So
for those of you who don't know, the Losers, they were a group of soldiers in World War II, kind of along the same lines of Sergeant Rock.
right,
It was like the Losers and the Haunted Tank. They were kind of together.
right. And the losers are also in New Frontier.
They also make an appearance in the cartoon last season too.
Oh, cool.
So if you've been watching that cartoon, you'll get a
Justice League
glimpse of them.
Unlimited.
Yeah.
And it's a new Vertigo series now too.
Yeah, exactly.
Which it is a bunch of military guys that
They're like rejects,
They're
right?
CIA guys or whatever, special ops, and then the CIA kind of sends them on a mission and then cuts them, and then says, "Oh, now you're bad guys because we pretended we were hoping you would die and you didn't, but now
right.
we wish you were dead because now you know secrets, and so now you're
What's the title of that?
the losers."
Is that what it is? Oh wow.
Yeah.
Another Grant Morrison's Animal Man, the last like 4 or 5 issues, that was kind of called like the second Crisis. They put out a Legends of DC Universe special on Crisis on Infinite Earths that Marv Wolfman wrote, and it sort of takes place, and that's actually going to be included, I think,
Oh,
in
wow.
the Absolute. I think
Interesting.
it takes place between
The
issues.
unofficial title of that story was Crisis Number 4.5.
Yes,
So
yes.
shoehorned in between issues 4 and 5 of the original story.
Wow.
Yep. And then there was a 5-issue Dead Man series called Dead Again, where he revisited like certain deaths of certain characters, and number 1 was about Barry Allen
Yeah.
with a Crisis tie-in. JLA Incarnations was a 7 or 8 issue miniseries, and I think issue 6 actually has a banner, Crisis banner on it.
Yes, it does.
And then there was what else? I know there was a few more.
Well, yeah, I mean, if
Flash, I think it was number 150 or something like that.
Yep.
Just before that Hyper Time Flash storyline that they had back around like 99, I think. It involved something happened where Barry was taken out of the time stream and did not die to destroy the antimatter cannon as he was supposed to, and Wally had to step in and sort of die in his place, so to speak. Although he didn't actually die, of course. He bounced into the Speed Force and bounced out again as he had so many times before.
I think that also was the first appearance of the Anti-Monitor after the Crisis on Infinite Earth. Like,
I think you're right.
right. And there may be 1 or 2 more that I'm forgetting. One of the things I wanted to say to tie the Crisis on Infinite Earths at that time with what's going on now, they talk about a whole revamp, a whole a new identity for the DC Universe and whatnot, and it really does feel the same way, like what they did with Crisis on Infinite Earths. You know what? I'm speaking out my butt because I totally lost my point.
well, I was going to say, I
Yes.
mean, it's silly, regaining your thoughts.
Yeah.
Just to spend more money for our listeners. If you really want a good overview, pick up History of the DC Universe, which was initially a 2-issue miniseries that came out right after this. Again, done by Wolfman and Perez. God, I hate that. His name's Perez.
There is an accent over the
Was
first
it like
E.
an accent aigu or something?
Yeah, well, my name should have a comment, and it should be of Alessandro, but never mind. That's a different story altogether. The History of the DC Universe. It's worth getting. I really enjoyed it, and I really will go from point A to point B to point C.
And there is a trade.
Incorporating. Yeah, and there's a trade lovely cover by Alex Ross.
If you get the chance, there's a nice hardback with a spread in there of all
That's
the
hard to
characters.
find.
I know.
Yeah, that's
Jamie
really hard
Verth,
to find.
two-hesitant bastard.
It's funny. This is
I
what I was
hope
going to
Jamie
say.
of Earth 2 and Jamie of Earth 1 don't merge and become one, and they each have half their memories. That would really be weird.
We always try to stay on the opposite side of the room.
Yeah, just so you don't get
Just
sucked
in case.
Yeah.
Crisis
You
on Reading
never
PA. This is what I was going to say. The current those 4 miniseries that came out of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the Ran Thanagar War, OMAC Project,
Villains United.
Villains United, and Day of Vengeance. While I was reading this trade this time, I went, oh, son of a gun, if they didn't take those 4 elements from this thing. Because there's a supervillain war, there's the whole OMAC Project reminds me of the Monitor, and like knowing all the stuff. Day of Vengeance, the whole mystic thing, there is a part in this with Spectre and the mystics and things like that, and the whole Ran Thanagar War with the whole with the different planets and this one there's a later on, you get like all the space heroes combined and so like they must have said, you know what, we could do this, we could do that. It's maybe not.
I noticed that too. I was reading, I guess it was issue probably 12, where they kind of have all the sorcerers around, and I'm like, oh, well, there's Enchantress. She's in there. And then they even had Detective Chimp.
I was just going to ask.
He was there too. And then you have the whole villains uniting against the heroes, which they did. I'm thinking more the Ran Thanagar War is probably, if you want to put it anywhere in the actual continuity, is probably the war on Oa between the two factions of the Guardians.
That's good.
That annotated Crisis website that Adam had mentioned also has an extensive crossover checklist, not only for the official ones, but all the little wingnut, like you see Monitor's arm, you see every issue that they have that he appeared in that has, last time I looked at it, had a very extensive checklist, which is a great resource.
The other thing that that again I couldn't remember before, when Crisis came out, it was also a way, because DC acquired all the Charlton characters and all the quality characters, this was a way to throw in Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, Judo Master, Captain Atom, Nightshade, Question. They used the Freedom Fighters before, so that was okay. It also was a way to show that they have all these Wild West characters, Johnny Thunder and Jonah Hex, and then that they also have all these space characters, and that they also have all these barbarian characters. And that, tied to what's going on now, they're bringing all this stuff back again. We talked about it before. They're bringing back Warlord. They're going to bring back Sergeant Rock. They're going to bring back Jonah Hex.
Yep.
So it's a way DC is saying once again, we have all these other things. We have this space, with Adam Strange. We need to use all of it, and we need to show that we can really create good stuff with every single part of our history. And I think that's why you get Supergirl coming back, because they're like, you know what? That was a really good thing for us back then. We need to bring it back. We need to bring back all these other characters. So I think that, to tie it with what's going on now, that's a major thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
I don't have any more questions personally.
I have to say, reading it again, that Death of Supergirl, wow. That really...
Powerful stuff.
it is.
I wasn't blowing smoke up your ass.
No,
It's powerful stuff. It truly is, and it stands up 20 years later. It still stands as a good story.
He really captured a neat thing, because she's so heroic in this series. And it's like, she's going to fight and da-da-da, and she goes and saves her cousin, and it's like, what's coming, and I was still getting chills. I thought that was just, that was incredible.
Was she very much a secondary character in Pre-Crisis? Like, not so heroic as you said she was so heroic in this? Was she so blasé?
There were like those. I remember those adventure comics in the 70s. They like mixed her in with like a lot of romance stuff, and it wasn't until the 80s where they gave her that last series of hers that I thought she really kind of they wanted to make her a little more important. Then they tried the movie. And by that time, it just kind of was too little, too late. And
such a shame. For
same
that
thing
movie.
with Flash. Same thing with Wolfman's not doing right. Wolfman's he wanted to kill Flash because he felt, since Flash was so important to the Silver Age, they felt that was very symbolic. But his series ended because it wasn't making a lot of money. It was I love all these fans who go, oh my God, I love the Flash. Well, you obviously didn't love him enough to keep a series going.
And like you said, Wally West is such a strong character. That's who I've always read as the Flash, and I love it. I absolutely love what he does.
Right. So that's why another reason why I thought that, they killed off Supergirl, Flash, is because there were some other things other than just trying to be shocking or whatever. But I thought they did it with great respect, the entire thing.
It's such a shame, that Supergirl movie. I really thought Helen Slater looked so fantastic in that outfit.
It's a good movie.
I want to watch the extended version. I've never gotten a hold of a copy of that and
Right.
watched the whole thing.
Right. So I'm trying to think if there's any.
Anything else Adam would say?
No. Well, we know. Adam, do you have any last thoughts on Crisis?
Actually, our friend Matt, who is a part-time panelist on Comics Geek Speak also, he gave me a few words of his he'd like me to put in.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it an F, Mary, kill?
First thought, not a fat man.
Yeah, I'll agree there. That was the one
Second
surprise
thought,
I had.
He goes along with Jamie of Earth 1 in saying that the death of Barry Allen is one of the best done in comics history and should never be reversed. And I third that myself. And lastly, basically, Hypertime sucks.
Hypertime doesn't suck.
That was Mark Waid. That's all Mark Waid wanting to do stories.
Well, Grant Morrison was the one who actually came up with it, and Mark Waid just butchered it. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I like actually Hypertime. I think what it allows is kind of cool. It allows that all these stories are there, but I think that's what Morrison might be working up to in like 2 years, maybe something dealing with that, which might be cool.
Be good to get him back to doing his original version
Right.
Vision.
Right.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, I think that's all for Crisis on Infinite Earths. Our next Book of the Month Club, which will be for July of 2005, is going to be Marvel's Earth X. It is available in trade, and you can get it. I didn't pull it up here on In-Stock Trades.
Who's it? Alex Roth, Jim
and
Kruger.
Jim Kruger, Alex Ross, with like concepts and plots, and it's oh my lord! I was thinking Tommy Lee Edwards, but it's not him. It's
Is that Paul Leon or something, or Leon something? I forget the other artist.
It's actually really good. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I have read it. I'm going to have to go back and reread it, but it's kind of a what if story, just to whet your appetite a little bit. A future what if with the Marvel universe.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So that's all. And until next month, we'll be doing our regular episodes. And
send us your response to this if you have anything.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about Earth X, send us your thoughts on that. And we will see you soon.
See ya.